So, I love having conversations with you, Jamie. I affectionately call you Jamie. Obviously, James Haven. Things like justiceness, things like freedom from exploitation, things like the legacy of fatherhood, things that people need to understand about the prevention of violence, things people need to understand about getting past trauma, things about art imitating life, things that deal with individuals understanding identity after going through trauma or fatherless homes or all the crap and stuff that can just cause us to be so confused about where to go, what to do, who am I, almost existentializing stuff that we can be, I don't know, have the propensity sometimes to take on the identities of pop culture or other issues, not realizing that some of those things actually can be damaging. And for someone like you and like me, say whatever you want, but I know you fight for the rights of children, and thereby fighting for the rights of children, you're being filled in your own heart and your own soul, but then you're also teaching things so that adults and children understand the power and joy of living, but how to protect ourselves. And just let's just kind of wonk a little bit on obviously this amazing.
Your mic cut off a little bit. Did you ask me a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I didn't really ask you a question because this is not an
Oh
interview.
yeah, I just want to make sure your mic kind of cuts out, so I just want to know. You'll edit it later, but I just want to make sure you know that. But so
Okay.
just start talking, or should I
Yeah, just
just?
go for it.
Well, the very first thing I want to say is it's an honor to be a part of this journey with you, bro. I know we met many years ago, and then we came back into each other live in such an incredible moment just a few years ago, and now we're preparing for this big event on March 20th, which is going to be truly, I think, extraordinary. It's a dream come true for me. There's so many things we're going to be doing, but it's just a dream come true to be able to travel this country and really address the issue of human trafficking and really give people the tools to understand what's going on and then to be able to, you know, to prevent it in their own lives. So just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, right at the top, I think you said something really important a moment ago. And every different race, every different sex or gender, every different, you know, category that we want to put on people. We all have our things that are in our own cultures that are good and bad. And the problem is when, it turns into something that monetarily turns into something else, and then people just think it's money. It makes money. People like, but they don't look at what that does. In the culture, by and large, it's just, oh, that's entertainment. And that's one of my favorite phrases, by the way, because I come from entertainment. So you just say it's entertainment. It's just entertainment. It's entertainment.
Right.
No, if you keep calling a girl a certain name in music, no matter what the genre of music, you're calling her that name. And that's a name that's subjugating her to a lesser class of woman. And all we're thinking that she's useful for is sexual
Mhm.
proclivities and nothing
Yeah.
else. That's basically what you're saying. So stop calling her that. Just stop calling her that, stuff like that. And so yeah, and then the movies don't get me started. I mean, how many times in movies or television shows are we endorsing certain things that again we just go again back to what I said a moment ago, and then the classic line from Gladiator: "Are you not entertained?" It's like, well, we know they fed Christians the lions back then, but people were being entertained, right? I mean, that's the phrase, right? You're being entertained. This is disturbing.
Right.
So yeah, we really need to look at ourselves, and we need to go back in time throughout history. That's why I love you like me, where I call myself the scientist, and I look at observation, and as the scientific methods, first thing you do is look at observation, and so I observe things, and what I'm observing is things that are very disturbing. I mean, I'll go right for the jugular. It's like, is it that we see these pictures of very deranged couples, and they make them look really deranged? The hair is wild, the glasses are wild, their clothing is wild, and they've like killed six of their children. Now, those people, most people would say, get rid of them, take them, whatever. But then you show a priest or something like that, and everybody goes, gosh, oh, I'm so, and you're like, no, he's the same. He should be taken out of the church. You shouldn't give any tithing money until they tell you that the church is safe, just like mold in a building. Like there was a very infamous story a couple of years ago. Mark Burnt was the guy's name. There was a school, and they closed it because he was
Mhm.
basically doing something with liquid with children in the dark. And basically, they closed the whole school down. They put a big police tape, you might know the story, put a big police tape around it. And parents kept saying, no, I have to go back to work. You have to take my kid back in that classroom. And they kept saying, man, there's this man that we believe has been doing this to many children. It's a crime scene. Well, that's what I'm saying. The church does that. It's a crime scene. It's a business, a crime scene. This is a crime scene now. and it needs to be taken seriously. So that's the society that I want to live in, where we start to really take the addressment of children and children who are being harmed, whether it's 5, whether it's 10, whether it's high school, college, whatever, and then give them a really good chance, using the math of 22, which is the normal supposed college age. Give them a chance at 22 to live, whole and healthy lives.
Yeah. So there's a lot we can say about how obviously reduce and end and discover exploitation, rape. When we think about the issue of exploitation, how I got into this and how and why people like you, me, want to serve humanity through information, through education, whether it's airports, legislative leaders, individual peoples, mothers, fathers, children, whomever, because there's something powerful about identity.
Hmm.
When you don't know who you are, it's very difficult for you to become everything that you desire to become. Most of us, it said, only touch the tip of the iceberg of our potential in life. And that potential meets opportunity when we're comfortable around others, when we're not running and hiding or cutting or feeling socially awkward or able to be our authentic selves. And rape, molestation, sexual violence, human trafficking, labor trafficking, bondage to someone or even something based on trauma and that causes trauma moves us out of who we're really born to be. And sometimes, as we were talking about the other day, we just go along to get along. We take on these personality types and characteristics because of that trauma we suffered as a child, and we push it down and we think, oh, it's going to go away. And I say that to say that many of the victims I've worked with over 20 years and their families had a parent that was never healed of the rape or the trafficking or the domestic violence, so they didn't recognize it in their child, in their family. And two, and we talked about this yesterday, human trafficking starts early because sexual violence, molestation, all these gnarly things are root causes of it. It's easier for someone to manipulate a broken child. One of your favorite quotes by Frederick Douglass is what?
Yep. It's easier to build strong children than it is to fix broken men.
Exactly. And so, what does darkness do? It pursues to raise up children in violence and abuse. And because children are resilient, we don't always recognize it. Victims don't know that they're victims in certain parts of Mexico, certain parts of Eastern Europe, certain parts of Africa, certain parts of anywhere in the world, even sometimes in the US. You can see in Thailand, if there's this red light district, there's a 7-year-old running around with no shoes on, you know what's going on. You see them going in and out of huts with men, grown men, mostly from the US. In the US, it doesn't look like that.
It doesn't.
You rescued a girl, we talked about this, and you didn't realize you rescued her. But rescuing is subjective because bondage is in the mind. Even if you're out of a situation of trafficking and rape, now everyone thinks you should be healed and know who you are, but you don't. You were raised in trauma and violence, so that is who you are.
Hmm.
And so this girl that you helped, the time you spent with her was the quintessential moment as a man of honor, a leader, and advocate of justice for young people. Your gift, your anointing, the time you spent with her, it was all she needed to unlock for the blinders, the scales to come off her eyes to go, oh my God, oh my God. Tell me about that.
Well, I just want to add one quote because we get into that one, there's, Dr. Gabor Mate, and, I say this quote all the time,
Mm.
and I really love to slow down the first part because I think if everybody could process it, there is a wisdom in trauma when you realize the trauma is not of yourself. And the key is to work through it and thus become yourself. And so that's a huge part of it too, because we function, as you said a moment ago, from that trauma the rest of our lives. Like, well, I'm trying to work, yeah, but you're still, the trauma is not of yourself. And I just wanted to emphasize that, after your
Yeah,
point.
I love that. I
Yeah,
love,
it's
and
so
we love
important
him.
because,
He's extraordinry. Yeah.
yeah, he's great. So I remember that quote. And then just to clarify, which girl, because I've saved quite many. Which one did you want to focus on? Just give me a little
Anyone,
more.
anyone where your presence, the words you spoke, you thought it was just a simple thing.
Right.
And it
Okay.
was actually,
I'll give you.
Good for
I'll give
you.
you one that was very recent. I've lost four people to suicide, and I won't lose another. So I'm determined to make sure that I really stay in touch with people and whatnot. But there was a girl, I dated her a few years back, and then she became a porn star, and then she took her life. And the last thing she wrote in her journal was, "Jamie, forgive me." And I went to the funeral, and I was there with her younger sister, and this is the one I spent time with. And I spent a lot of time with her. She was grieving. She's the one that found her. Um, she'd shot herself, and we talked a long time. And I could tell, because I've been trained in stuff like this, that there's more that's going on in this house. And the father showed up, who had been on a business trip. And over the course of a couple of days, I was there. I was mostly just there for her and got him food and just
Hmm.
to go through the trauma, stuff that I can do to help. But the long story short of it is, I got him to confess to molesting both girls. So they took him away and out of the home. And then that girl, you know, she was so disheveled by what happened that we kind of focused her. And I said, well, there's other girls just like your sister right now who are in your high school. And her sister was in her 20s and she was 14. And I said, there's girls right now in your high school, they're going to take their life, or they're getting ready to take they're preparing, they're wanting to take their life. And
Hmm.
so what you could do right now is focus all that you're feeling and create a program at your high school so they don't commit, suicide, or don't have suicidal ideation. And they had had about, I think it was 6 suicides in the last 2 years at her high school. And she created this program. And as of now, there's not been one suicide at her high school. And
That's
she's doing well.
incredible.
Yeah. So that's just one example. Yeah. And back to the time thing, because you opened the question, Brooke, with that. I learned that from my mom.
Hmm.
It's something I just want to add. And my dad and I talk about this all the time. Not that my dad, is a bad father in this regard, but just the idea of, I remember when I'd be getting ready for school and I'd have a bad day the day before. I might have been picked on, bullied, whatever, and I'm out of it. I'm not functioning. I'm scared to go back to school. I'm kind of like shaking a little bit. And my mom was just this person. I just don't know how to explain this. I know parents have it difficult, but
Hmm.
this 2-minute conversation is more important than anything. And that is that
Right.
to keep saying we got to go, we got to go, we're gonna be late, we're gonna be late. We're like, come on, we'll talk later. We'll talk later. We'll talk later. No, 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 no. Stop everything. Why is your 8-year-old shaking in the kitchen? Like, just stop.
Hmm.
And I remember her getting on the ground, and she would always be like, boom. It would just be like, hey, what's going on? And I'd be like, I don't really want to talk about it. She's like, no, no, it's okay. We can talk about it. No, you're right. I'm going to be late. No, forget school. It was like, it just, time stopped. And I learned that from her that, like, when you're talking to somebody, time stops. Like, a lot of people don't know this about me because they just never see me take my phone out at lunch or dinner or breakfast. But when I'm in the presence of someone in that form, not a party, Hollywood, not standing or not me, I don't mean that. But when I'm like this, I'm like dinner, breakfast, lunch, I put my phone in airplane mode every time. You'll never see me take my phone out if I'm going to give you that conversation. And I learned that from my mom. It's just like nothing else matters. So back to one quick thing here. I got into all that I do because of something that was truly a moment that I will share maybe at our event or I'll share it in the future. But I just want to add to this that, 10 years ago, July, so to be 10 years
Hmm.
ago, I get a call. I get a call from a person that's like one of my handlers, like business person, and they just say, James, there's a woman trying to get a hold of you. She somehow got the number here, and I don't think she's a stalker or something like that, but she just says she's a middle-aged woman, and she said that she doesn't want you to think you're a stalker, but basically she's a mom of kids and da 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 da. And she said you saved a program in San Diego that saves like 1,000 kids a year from child abuse. And I don't think they joke about that. And the most she said, child abuse, I said, have her call me because I don't think, let's go, let's go, let's go. So she calls me up. Her name's Kimberly. She's a dear friend of mine. We just talked this morning, actually. I told her about my marriage. And this is all it was. It was real simple. It was, oh my gosh, is this actually Mr. Haven? She always calls me Mr. Haven. Like, Kim, it's Jamie. No, Mr. Haven. Oh my God, you're still calling me. No, it's Jamie. It's so adorable. She's so adorable. But my point is, the story's key. The story is key. And this is like for everybody. This is like for the lowest level janitor who gets like, paid with cash or whatever. So he's like not even whatever, the cheap, whatever, to the richest billionaire on earth. Whenever you think you can't make a difference, these are the moments where you go, you can. And that
Right.
is the backstory really quickly was I was asked by a friend of mine, James, there's a couple of girls they're staying in my house at the moment. Some are runaways. Some have been kicked out of the house because they're pregnant. They're 14, 15 years old. You're
Mhm.
really good at inspiring the youth when they really feel down. Would you just talk to them? I said, absolutely. What do you want me to do? She goes, would you come to a park? We're going to get some picnic stuff. You can talk to all of them or whatever. I said, yeah, I'll do whatever you want. So at first I kind of talked to all of them. And then I talked to one-on-one what was going on. And then time goes by and I leave and I go, well, obviously I help the girls and, all that thing. Then you cut to this phone call, you know, and all of a sudden I get this. What's up? Oh, hey, James, it's Kimberly. Da 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 da. I work with da 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 da. There's a program I saved. It's 96% conviction rate of those who are child abuse children, and then they get help and da 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 da. It was on the chopping block. Read your story of helping young girls on the cover, or helping youth to specifically helping inspire youth on the cover of the San Diego Union Tribune, and it inspired me to call Bill Gates and everybody else in Rancho Santa Fe and everyone else in the program's now saved forever. I was like, I didn't save a program, in whatever. And then cut to, I called my friend. I said, what happened there? He said, well, one of the girls recorded you talking to her, and she said it to her dad as the editor in chief of the newspaper. And the rest is history. And after that, I got fully involved with child abuse and the understanding of it and the ACE studies and just everything else. So it was like a double journey. So there's like the work I do, and there's like, I thought I was helping just a few girls in a park. And
Right.
little did I know I would find my calling. So, yeah.
I think I'm not sure based on our first time using this platform and not knowing how much longer we have to record and start over, but
Yeah, we can do whatever. Mhm.
I think that, one of the things I love about living and being me now that most people don't understand is that when you grow up in trauma, when you're repeatedly raped, I think I mean, come on. The stuff with Diddy, the stuff with even Tim Ballard, like, I thought he was helping people. People get confused about what is what and what is real and what's going on. And I think that being someone who grew up in Hollywood and comes from Hollywood and went into Hollywood as a victim and thought I was going to fulfill this incredible dream. And as I was fulfilling, I thought that was going to be the thing that saved my life. But my soul was assassinated. My identity had been discovered. And so when I saw other kids around Hollywood and downtown LA, and started to help them, I started to realize I am completely like jacked up emotionally, psychologically. I still was addicted. I was thought of suicide, yet I was making a lot of money as an actor. And, I was pursuing to discover a newfound faith that I haven't discovered yet. And it was actually your dad that, told me to go to this self-realization fellowship in Pacific Palisades, and it really really helped me a lot because that's where I discovered my faith as someone who follows the Lord. But um I think for me, I'm like a big kid. And sometimes people don't understand. I could be doing something completely different. I could like freak out over an ice cream cone
Exactly the same.
or like a movie or
Mhm.
want to take my shoes off at the park and run and go to the beach. And because as a child, I really didn't get to live. And even though there's that connection of discovering one's authentic self, many of the individuals I meet when I'm working with child victims, I meet grown women that will pull me into a corner or men and cry. And I'm like, what's wrong? They said I was raped when I was 5, or I was molested by my dad, or I was raped when I was 15, or I was repeatedly raped and I never told anybody and I buried it. And people don't realize that survivors of sexual violence, many in the world today, don't live. If it's not suicide or addiction, they were murdered or killed. And when it relates to trafficking, some of them are born into trafficking, so there's not even a birth certificate. And some we don't know because their names and their documentation, their paperwork is askew. And so, but I always say to people at this point, the greatest power of discovering oneself, if you can get to the side of pain and you can help other people do that too, the giftings that we're born with and that we develop over time, because it's not like, oh, I have this gift and I can just do it. No, even Beethoven, who had sort of an inkling for the piano, had to keep practicing his craft. And it got better and better and better and better. And when we're traumatized, we're perpetually living and practicing the craft of being traumatized. And so the actions that we're facilitating, the movements, the decisions, our thought processes are all out of that bondage and that trauma. Even sometimes, peradventure, some people are successful they have unfulfilled relationships, or that work or that thing becomes everything and there's no life balance. And I try not to say work life balance, but just life balance. But, I love men like you. I love men like my husband. I love men who have a tender understanding because sexual exploitation is camouflaged in a highly sexualized society. And if we don't have the sensitivity to understand that these are all at the root of mental health issues and the lack of propensity to see the pain of others, we won't stop or end or reduce human trafficking or rape, etc., etc. And I love being me now. I used to look back all the time and be like, oh my God, I grew up this way and that, it was just like horrible. And there's a lot of pain, a lot of sorrow. And if I don't fight every day, sometimes, the darkness is trying to pull me back into that. You're nothing. You can't do that. You can't raise money for the nonprofit you know that you work for, even though you founded it. You work for it. And or the tech stuff that I'm doing that was like a childhood dream. Like, I believe that if individuals get past pain and trauma, that it's limitless about what they can understand about behavior and what they can do, and the ideas of innovation and creativity that can be wrought. I believe that.
I do too.
I want to, we're pursuing to inspire people to discover who they are. And if we could just inspire people to help one person, to see one person, even if it's helping themselves, we can end human trafficking, because we have to end human trafficking. And the only way to do it is to deal with the root causes, the issues of bigotry, racism, bias, the issues of someone is better or greater, the issue that, well, that's who they are, they were born that way, or they were in that situation, so it's kind of normal. Or the idea that we have sympathy looking down at someone, but not empathy. I'm right here in the sandbox with you face to face. You don't belong there. That is not who you're born to be. And we talked about the other day, if you have 1 in 4.5 girls on a, college campus, Ivy League or otherwise, that's raped. If you have people, your passion going to college campuses, going through airports as you're about to do with More to Life, and because of your own passion and your own ideas, be able to educate individuals in really unique ways, and being able to do things around demand prevention so that men and fathers and others understand the power that they possess, which is something that we've always done. And so when I look at the numbers, and when I look at sometimes how people look at me, like, I have short hair. Now, my hair grows really long, and my husband doesn't care that it's short, but I feel comfortable. I work out, and so I have really muscular legs. So when I wear a skirt or something, people are like, wow, your legs are great, like at home with my family. But I won't show my legs out in public. And it's not, maybe it's because when I was traumatized and victimized, maybe that was a thing. So sometimes I feel uncomfortable, and it doesn't mean I'm not free. It just means I don't have to share, because people do stare at you when you wear certain things. You know how
Absolutely.
that is.
Sure. Absolutely.
And whatever I can do to help me feel more comfortable. But when we work with young victims, sometimes they have that question: what do I wear? I'm
Hmm.
sure, when you spoke to some of the victims of More to Life, it really wasn't about that, but you got to hear from them and they heard from you. And one of the most powerful things you said to them is almost like one of those slow motion. You were talking about something else, and I asked you a question, and it was like slow motion, like, and you looked at them and you said, "You're the heroes.
Other heroes.
You're the heroes." And you said it in such a palatable, palpable way that it just resonated. It was like beyond church bells, when it's like boom, and you're like, what? And I think we undo shame in that sense. We give people that have been so traumatized and so victimized, or to understand that they can be free from all of that. And even though you're not a victim of exploitation, you've had your own victimizations in life, your own ways that you feel exploited or hurt or traumatized. And don't you think that if we share that everyone has something in relation to a victim, because we've all been hurt or victimized in some way, we can create this sort of understanding in the curriculum and in the talks and in the wherewithal that really build out, like the massive campaign, which we won't say what it is because it's a secret, that we're launching next year, which is tomorrow. This is New Year's Eve
Crazy.
2024,
It's crazy. It's
y'all.
my favorite holiday, by the way. First of the year. I feel like a kid in a candy store. I always love first of the year. No.
But what do you, if we were to be able to do all that and inspire people in that way, can't we,
Well, I
Jamie?
mean, you set that point up perfectly, Brooke. I mean, the idea is, how does human trafficking affect us all? Well, because I'll just use myself. I was neglected. I would put my category of abuse under neglect, mental abuse as well, but very much neglect. Well, a huge part of that whole point of trafficking is neglect. There's tremendous neglect going on there. So anybody who's been raised with forms of neglect, and I even come from a town that's known to be very wealthy. I'll tell you the great example of neglect. How many kids did I go to school to that would make them raise their hand right now? These are Beverly Hills kids. And I'd be like, so your dad comes like once a month and you have dinner and you just kind of go over your grades and he's like, are you dating and all that? And then you go back to your room and you don't see him again for a month. That's neglect. So, I mean, like every one of us has that form, and that's people who are trafficked are being neglected. So the idea is that we make it just very like we're all this or we're all that. And so if you're really neglected, which would be full speed, like in the trafficking world, then people don't even know if you're missing sometimes. They don't even like you're just like there's a girl and we haven't seen her in a while and she's gone. And the
Yes,
town
like you
just
don't
goes, yeah, she's
exist.
gone. Yeah. They don't even think anything.
This is gone.
So
Poor girl.
yeah, she's just
She
gone.
always
Yeah,
had
she's just
challenges.
gone.
She was
Yeah.
always unusual. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and that happens all over the world. So that's the other
Instead,
thing.
instead of she was always being victimized, she was always being groomed, she was being
Right.
raped, she had been molested. She's gone because she's running from profound
Exactly. What is a
trauma.
runaway? Exactly. What is a runaway? Well, you're
Yeah.
running away from something. I mean, it's unbelievable. The wording is perfect. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
The last thing I want to talk
It's
about it really quick for today,
yeah.
I think is, I posted this thing about forgiveness and I was talking to Dan about it.
Hmm.
And it was, you know, it had to do with everything around, I'm actually going to take a picture because this is so like you and me.
Okay.
I'm going to take a picture. This is Jamie. I'm sending it to everybody. But I talked about how I forgave my traffickers.
Okay.
And this individual was so, I had inboxes and comments and stuff. And I thought, when I talk about it, it's kind of this thing right here. And I'll just play it. And so in this watershed moment, we have to decide what comes after this massive semicolon. I forgave not just my trafficker, but my traffickers. And I didn't forgive them because it heals them. I forgave them because it healed me. Forgiveness is quintessential. Data analytics is important, mental health is important, but without forgiveness and the acquiescence of understanding that everything in the world affects everything in the world, if we don't fight for the human rights monstrosities that took place, they will happen again and again. And it's true that on both sides, it's just horrible. What has happened
Hmm.
to the Palestinians is horrible. What happened to the Israelis on October 7th is horrible. What's happening to the community now is horrible. All of these things are complex and, you know, but I was talking about me, right? I was talking about, and so when I got this one girl, she was like, well, would you forgive yourself or would you forgive traffickers? Would you forgive all of these individuals if they were raping your sister right now, if they were trafficking right now, if they were doing things right now that relegated you to feel more pain? And here was my response to them, and I want to know what you think about it. I said, hashtag forgiveness to those that have mostly inboxed me and also comment on why to forgive, depending on how deep the crime, evil, and so on. I can only surmise that what has been true for me. Thus, this is my response to you. Forgiveness is not a luxury for me, as someone had said. It's a commandment. It never lets the person off the hook for profound evil. It lets their victims or families free from being in bondage to the trauma it created. It actually infuses on such a high frequency that it shatters the work of evil by rendering God's presence. And for people who don't believe in God, it renders something much higher than us. It doesn't mean we stop fighting the evil. It means we can now do so without being in bondage. And for me, forgiving my traffickers was about me not being in bondage
Hmm.
because they're not going to be off the hook, but I needed to be off the hook in order to do this work. What do you think about how forgiveness plays a part in this issue, especially when 30% of the men that come into one of our programs at More to Life were
Hmm.
victims themselves? And I'm not talking
Well,
about traffickers, I'm talking about traffickers and buyers.
Well, the first thing I want to add there is that I love your view of that, just the way you broke it down. And the only thing I would add is it's like anything in life. It's like if I say to people human trafficking is not a foreign problem because they think it is, because that's the way they've been trained, then they don't think it was a problem that's like in Orange County or a problem that's here or there. So they have to have that openness to see it. The way you just said they don't get off the hook. If you had just opened with that, right, to a like a normal room of people, right, that are
Mm,
not fully educated on a topic, then they're in. They're all going to go, yeah, okay, let's go. The problem is when we hear the word forgiveness, we hear it like as if it's just a throwaway. Whether we've been trained, or trained it, by our society, you have to forgive. You just have to forgive. They don't even care if you're like mentally. They don't care. They don't even care where you are. You have to forgive. So, or the certain belief systems focusing on that, and not giving that context. But if you say they're not off the hook, they freed me from it. Frees me from what? Then that's astounding, and I love it. So yeah, that would be my response. Yeah.
so we talk about movies really quick. So we talk about one of our favorite actors, Denzel Washington,
Oh yes.
and Equalizer, because we like when guys or gals fight like evil, and because we all have to be that in our own lives. We
Yes,
all
and
we
really,
all
and
have.
really quick, not to get and really quick. If he was a minister, I would have had him do my wedding. He just did that like a week ago. So, okay, sort of add that. Okay, yeah,
So we all have to be that in our own lives, right? Even against the things that we cause in our own minds and in our own lives, and that's the
yes,
part, this perpetual part of discovering identity and being free in life to do whatever we're born to do. So when you're going after that kind of evil and fighting it, it doesn't mean you don't forgive the person just because you fight them. What do you think about that as relates to, because when he went in the room in the first Equalizer one, I mean, he kicked some butt. I mean, he
yes,
went in there
yes.
and you're like, yeah, I want
And
to.
he does it in 30 seconds. By the way, he makes a point of that. It's very like 28.5. Okay, he's like, okay,
But they were actually about to hurt him.
yes,
So really, it was self-defense. He had, an envelope of money. Tell me a little about that scene. He had an envelope of cash. It was
hmm
9,000. It
hmm
was almost 10,000. How he says it,
right,
nine
right, right,
thousand
right.
nine
Sure,
hundred thirty
sure,
dollars,
sure,
whatever it
sure.
was. He puts it down and he pursues to say, I want this girl
Yeah,
who's
freed.
being raped and trafficked.
That's right. I want her freed.
So why do you like that? Why do you like that moment so much?
Well, I'm going to double down. I'm going to double down. I'm going to do one from the second one as well. No, no, I'm just going to cover two moments that specifically, because one is actually dealing with like the traffickers, one's dealing with the people committing the crime, essentially. So I just want to double down there. But no, the reason I like that so much is because,
Hmm.
first of all, he's done whatever his quote unquote background is, military training. So he's really got the ability to do this kind of stuff. So that's part of the character. But what
Yeah.
I just like is whether it's your mind or your physical ability or whatever, I like the fact that, as I said, I can sit down with a guy who's a father of a girl that I dated who just killed herself, use my mind and get him to confess. In that case, he can actually go in and say, look, I want her freed, which is what he's asking. And if they had simply just taken the cash and said, okay, he wouldn't have had to do anything. But in that context, he's got to physically do something to say, okay, 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 we'll let her go. So I like the idea that like he knows what he needs to use against the quote unquote traffickers, which would be like, the heaviest of heavy, the ones who, if they were cartels, they'd have guns or they'd have, so he knows that. But then in the other sequence, he does a little bit of beating up too, but he goes in and there's this girl who like was severely raped and they filmed it and all this stuff. And he just goes up to the actual apartment and goes in there and confronts those guys, like literally says, I want your cameras, I want your this, I want your
Right.
that, and there's
Well,
one
and
guy
they're in
who's a,
that resort
yeah,
hotel in like Vegas.
correct, correct.
Yeah.
And so I like the fact that he also lets one guy, I mean, I think they all were not killed, but he beats them up pretty bad. But the point is, he lets one guy go, what's her name? What's her name? Amy. That's right, Amy. So remember that, so like now that guy will never forget that. And he'll go on hopefully to be a better man and whatever. So he also teaches a lesson in that moment. So I would add that just to kind of do a double down where physical or mental, what I love about that character is he is the equalizer. And that's very much something that I love dearly in my life because that's something that I will do the rest of my life, no matter what it is. I want to be like that character, the equalizer. And when I say equalizer, I'm just going to add a point here.
Mm.
I love doing what I do. There's nothing on this earth I love more. You brought up that point really quick, and I'll get back to the movie. You brought that point earlier, how you're a big kid. I'm a big kid. I was named after James Barrie, who's, of course, the writer of Peter Pan. And I don't know how to explain this, but like when I get to walk in those airports and address human trafficking, I'm going to be a kid in the candy store. I'm actually going to be so happy to do that that it's going to be like energy I've never felt. All right, now we're going to do this, and we have to get this address. Like it's like it's what I do. So back to the equalizer, what I was going to say was this, is the equalizing of things is that so many times, back to men, I don't know what it is. A guy will say, anybody hurts my kid, I'll kill him. Okay. Well, there's a person who just raped somebody in your church, or there's somebody who just did something in your neighborhood, and you're very grateful that I came, and I appreciate the compliment. But there's this weird thing that happens where these grown men who have children just go, I love what you're doing to protect your kids, Jim. I just love what you're doing. And I want to always say, what are you doing? What, you just said you have a church nearby. Well, let's go there right now and find out the policy they had to protect kids. Or is your kids in a gymnastics thing like Larry Nassar type thing? Let's find out what they would do. Or, I mean, there's just this moment where you just go, I'm not the only hero in the room, or, what you think I am. You are. You live in this neighborhood. Like, that horrible shooting in Uvalde, Texas, where the cops didn't do anything and 23 kids were killed. If I'm a guy who's got a kid in that school, I'm not watching the ball game next day. I'm showing up saying, all right, this is never happening again. I'll take my day off or whatever. I work in construction, or I work in this, or I work in that. I got 6 guys here. Let's make this school safe. I mean, that's what I want to start inspiring, is like, so that's like the equalizing. Like there's the traffickers and then there's the equalizing. It's like, you get traffickers in an airport and they've got all the paperwork and they do whatever else. Well, I want to be equalizing that. I want people who work in the airports, terminals to know what they're doing with regard to trafficking. I want TSA to be up to speed. I want Uber drivers to be up to speed. I want hotel people to be up to speed. And then I want regular Joes who are traveling in the airport and people up to speed. I want everybody up to speed. Yeah.
And I think that the last thing I think we'll say um, on this New Year's Eve at 2:19 p.m. Eastern time
A moment.
is that anyone who's ever been violated or caused it, the transparency is really where healing begins.
Mm-hmm.
And the inspiration to tell someone, even of a simple date rape or something that happened a long time ago, if you don't come clean with someone or even the authorities or even someone, different levels of mentoring till you get to,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to heal from
Mm-hmm.
it without
Totally.
transparency because you have
Totally.
to go through to get to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're someone who absolutely is almost like, for me, and I know for you too, in order to really discover a life well lived, you have to lay everything out on the table, all of it. That's how we build, I think the acquisition of identity and authenticity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also want to add something here. Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Didn't cut you off.
it's not about wealth, what you have. Although you could be working toward, maybe you want to buy 20 houses for people around the world, and you want to buy everybody a car.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're a giving person, we always want to do something for other people, and so that's really important. But when you have soundness of mind and balance, a lot of the rest comes because
Yes.
your mind is
Well,
clear. You can
exactly.
critically think and discover and move
Exactly.
forward.
Yeah. No, I just want to add something. And also, I want a society that really gets up to speed on this. I mean, you know this very well, so I'm not teaching anything you don't know, but like, you know, Jesus is very clear on what he feels about children. And I would like that to be emphatically stated, to preachers or to the priests or whatever else, because the problem is they're such in that focus of, you know, he did what he did for you. And what ends up
Hmm.
happening is a lot of the people that are doing these crimes, and it's a mental thing. It's mental. If I walked into a room and said, I just molested a child, and they said, he died for you, he forgave all your sins, come back Sunday, I'll see you next Sunday. And you keep doing this every Sunday, they call them stairs. By the way, you know that, but they call them stairs for the audience that's listening to this. And they're stairs, and they just hang out in the church, and they're just getting this like download of like, I'm a total pedophile, but I'm totally forgiven. It's fantastic. And that's it. And then people are saying, but it's like a mind thing. And that's got
Yeah.
to be very clearly stated whether you're that guy or you're some person's, I won't name any names, but you're some person's wife whose husband is molesting children and you're just ignoring it. If you believe in a higher power, they're not happy with this. And
Yeah.
I
Render
don't
to
care
Caesar
what,
what is Caesar's, render to God what is God. So it's time to
yeah,
call the.
exactly. Exactly. You're not getting away with this. Yeah, you're not getting away with this. And somehow you just get this like, I am. It's like, you're not. Turn yourself in, please.
Yes.
God forbid late, but at least late for the worst, but early before you're thinking of doing this. Turn yourself in, if you believe in a higher power. Yeah. No.
Well, with that, we thank you so much for just spending some time with us today. James Haven is incredible. You can Google him and find out who he is. But the most important thing about him is that he is a justice advocate, abolitionist, not only for children, but for grown folk too. These days, we
Yes,
don't really like to think
absolutely.
that grown folk are
Elder
18.
abuse is serious. Yeah, all this stuff. I take it very seriously. Yes, of course.
And we are doing this on behalf of ourselves, but also excited to share the work of MORETOO life.org and all of our programs at Living Above the Noise, because living above the noise of our past assists us in discovering a greater and better tomorrow. And so, with that, I will say Happy New Year.
Yeah.
And I know.
Happy New Year. I couldn't wait. I can't wait. I mean, it's about, a little less than 12, a little more, sorry, than 12 hours away from me. But there's some people who already have. It's already New Year somewhere in the world, right? It's already.